Absolutely, Steelers Nation. Let's dive into this in a way that actually feels like a real conversation. Because this whole coaching search has been the kind of storyline that keeps you up at night. Brian Flores showing up in Pittsburgh for that in-person interview with Art Rooney and Omar Khan is a huge moment. It's the first time those two have done this face-to-face in the search to replace Mike Tomlin. And that alone signals this isn't just another name on a list. It feels like a turning point. But what's interesting is the vibe from the fan base. If I'm reading the room correctly, people aren't exactly losing their minds over Flores. And I'm trying to figure out why that is. He's the only candidate with actual head coaching experience in the NFL. Having done it for 3 years in Miami, that should matter. It should be a major factor, but for some reason, it's not lighting up Steelers Nation the way you'd expect. Part of that is Steelers history. This franchise has a tradition of betting on the unknown, on the first-time head coach. The fresh voice, Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, Mike Tomlin, each of them came in without prior head coaching experience. There's a sentimental streak in the organization that loves the idea of discovering the next great coach. It's like buying a brand new house. You walk in and nobody's lived there before, and there's something exciting about that. That new house feeling is real, and it can be intoxicating, but at the same time, you can't ignore the fact that Flores is in his mid-40s and he already has been in that seat, even if it wasn't in Pittsburgh. That's not a drawback. If anything, that should be seen as a plus. He's been through the pressures, the expectations, the media, the roster building, the public scrutiny. That experience should count for something. And here's the thing that should matter more than anything. He has been in Pittsburgh, not just in a vague sense, but in a real, visible role. He served as a defensive advisor, and he wasn't just a shadow figure. He was present. He spoke up. He was used. He knew the culture. He knew the players. He knew the expectations. That familiarity should be a strength, not a weakness. Then he left to become the Vikings' defensive coordinator, which was a move that some Steelers fans actually wanted him to get, instead of sticking with Terrell Austin, and that decision seems to have paid off. The Vikings' defense was outstanding this past season, ranking third in total defense across the entire league. Only the Texans and Broncos finished ahead of them, with the Browns right behind. That's elite company. They also forced 21 turnovers, ranking 10th in the NFL with 8 interceptions and 13 fumble recoveries. That's not just good coaching. That's a defense that knows how to win games by taking the ball away. So if you look at the resume, Flores has only strengthened it since leaving Pittsburgh. But we're not here to talk about resumes. We're here to talk about the head coaching job. And that's where things get complicated, because there are off-field issues that have people uneasy. And I'll be honest, I'm one of those people, but I want to be clear, my concern isn't the same thing that's bothering everyone else. I've dug into Flores' NFL history, and I see the separate chapters that are worth examining. First, his time in Miami, including how it ended. Second, his ongoing lawsuit against the NFL alleging racial discrimination in how coaches are hired. And yes, there is one specific point in that lawsuit that almost everybody would agree with. But I want to get to that later. Let's start with Miami. It was not a successful run. 24 wins, 25 losses, to winning seasons, 10-6 and 9-8. And not a single play off appearance. That alone doesn't scream future Hall of Famer. Now, everyone knew Flores was a sharp defensive mind before he got the job. And his work in Minnesota has proven that he still is. But this is not about being a defensive genius. This is about being a head coach. And the head coaching role requires more than just scheme. It requires leadership, communication, player management, and the ability to handle adversity without cracking. And that's where the Miami chapter gets messy. There was one relationship in particular that went public and got ugly. His relationship with Tua Tagovailoa, the Dolphins franchise quarterback. This wasn't a minor issue. This was a full-blown public breakdown, by every account, including Tua's. Flores was brutally tough on him. He reportedly told him he sucked and continued to belittle him after Flores was fired. Tua called him a terrible person. That's not just criticism of coaching style. That's a personal attack. And even though Flores later said he was happy for Tua's success and admitted his coaching style was harsh, the damage was already done. In the summer of 2024, when the media asked Flores about Tua's criticisms, he gave a response that honestly sounded like someone trying to talk his way out of a corner. He said coaching is about correcting, that he always has high standards, and that he's reflected on the situation. He talked about how he's grown, how he tries to apply what he's learned over the last 2 to 3 years. He mentioned having great relationships over his 21-year career, and how he's always looking to get better, whether it's schematics, personnel, or evaluations. He said he doesn't care where a good idea comes from. All of that is fine in theory, but the delivery, it didn't come across as confident or decisive. It came across as a bit nervous, a bit unsure, and in a head coach, that's a problem. You don't just need a smart coach. You need a leader who can stand tall in front of the team, in front of the media, and in front of the locker room when things get ugly. And that brings us to the word Art Rooney Jr. Cited as his top priority, leadership. The Steelers are not hiring a coordinator. They're not hiring a defensive mastermind. They're hiring a leader, someone who can set the tone, build the culture, and keep everyone aligned. And when you look at Flores' public handling of the Tua situation, you have to wonder whether that leadership is there in the way the Steelers need it. Now, let's address the lawsuit. I want to be clear. I have no problem with it in the context of the Steelers' job. I don't get the sense that it consumes Flores' time. This is a legal matter, and it's being handled by lawyers. It's not something that's going to distract him from coaching. And the core issue in the lawsuit is not just about alleged racism. It's about the fact that the NFL has one person, Roger Goodell, acting as the final decision maker in arbitration cases. One circuit court judge even wrote that the NFL provides arbitration in name only. The lawyers in the case argue that the league has relied on biased and unfair arbitration processes. Even in cases involving serious claims of discrimination, they argue that practice must end. And when you think about it, who do you think Goodell is going to rule in favor of? That part of Flores' story actually makes him look like someone willing to stand up for what he believes is right, even if it risks his career, and that's not a bad trait. It's actually admirable. But when you combine that with the Tua situation, and the question of whether Flores is the kind of leader the Steelers need, you start to understand why the fan base might be lukewarm. It's not that he's unqualified, it's that there are questions about whether he's the right fit for this particular franchise at this particular moment. Now, shifting gears to something a bit lighter but still important, let's talk about Caleb Johnson. This question came from a fan named Jedi, and it's a good one. Caleb barely saw the field as a rookie. It seemed like he was in Mike Tomlin's doghouse, and as a third-round pick, you want to see more opportunity than that. The good news is, I don't think the people currently running the team are going to just throw him away. I don't think Tomlin would either, but there was one exception, and it was in special teams. After that surreal mistake in the end zone, his time on kick returns was essentially over under that coaching staff. That decision was final, but there were moments during the season where Caleb got involved in ways I didn't expect. There were games where they gave him a drive or two, which felt like a genuine attempt to give him a chance, and that's significant. Because when you're behind Jaylen Warren and Kenny Gainwell on the depth chart, that's essentially the doghouse. There's just no room in the house. So you're out there on the porch. That's the reality of the situation. And I spent a lot of time talking with Caleb throughout the season, trying to gauge his mindset, and I could tell he was frustrated. He had been a workhorse in college, a true every down back. But in the NFL, the path isn't always clear, and when you're behind to established backs, your opportunities can be limited. Looking ahead to the summer and the next season, what I want to see from Caleb is an identity, not just from the team, but from the fans. We need a realistic expectation of who he is as a player. He's not a splash runner. He's more like Najee Harris was in Alabama than the kind of runner you see from Warren or Gainwell. If Caleb succeeds, he'll be the kind of back who grinds, who falls forward for a couple yards, who wears defenses down. That's valuable. It's not flashy, but it's effective. And if you watched how Tomlin and Arthur Smith used him last season, it often came in the middle of games or right after halftime, when they wanted to give the starters a breather or wear the defense down. That's the kind of role he could grow into. But he has to become more complete. He needs to hit the edge better. He needs to improve his blocking. He needs to catch the ball more consistently. Those are hard skills to hide in the modern NFL. If they're weaknesses, defenses will expose them. But if he can build on his strengths, he can become a real contributor. And I hope he gets that chance, because he's a good kid. I don't say that about everyone, but he really impressed me off the field. So yeah, I appreciate the question. And I appreciate getting something a little more football-y to talk about. Because this coaching search has been a roller coaster. All right, Steelers Nation. Let's keep this rolling because there's still a lot to unpack here. And the more you dig into this coaching search, the more you realize how high the stakes are. We're not just talking about replacing a coach, we're talking about replacing a culture. Mike Tomlin has been the face of this franchise for nearly 2 decades. And whether you love him or think it's time for a change, you can't deny the weight of what his successor is walking into. The expectations are massive. The fan base is passionate. And the Steelers have always been a team that does things a certain way. So when Brian Flores comes into the picture, it's not just about his resume, it's about whether he fits the identity of the Steelers. And that's where the debate gets heated. Flores has experience, sure. But Pittsburgh isn't just looking for someone who can call plays. They're looking for someone who can be the standard bearer for the franchise. The Steelers have a long history of strong leadership. From the days of Chuck Noll to Bill Cowher to Mike Tomlin, leadership has always been the core. The Steelers don't just want a coach, they want a captain. Someone who can navigate the pressures of the organization, manage personalities, and keep the locker room unified. And when you think about Flores' time in Miami, it's hard not to wonder whether he has the kind of leadership presence that the Steelers demand. Now, I want to be fair here. Flores has done a lot of good things. His defenses have been strong, and his track record in Minnesota has been impressive, but we can't ignore the fact that his time in Miami didn't end well. It was a losing record, no playoffs, and a public breakdown with the franchise quarterback. That's a red flag for some people, and I get why, but at the same time, you can also argue that he learned from that experience. You can argue that he's grown. You can argue that he's not the same coach he was back then. And if that's true, then maybe this is the perfect time for him to step back into the head coaching role. He's older, more experienced, and maybe more mature. But the question remains, do the Steelers want to take that chance? Because this is a franchise that doesn't like to gamble. They like stability. They like certainty. And Flores is a bit of a wild card. He's proven he can run a defense. And he's proven he can be a head coach. But the controversy around him, the lawsuit, the Tua situation, and the perception of his leadership style are all factors that make him a risky pick. And in Pittsburgh, risk isn't always embraced. The Steelers are a conservative organization in many ways. They like to do things the Steelers way. And that usually means hiring someone who fits the mold. Now, let's talk about the fan base again, because it's interesting to see how divided the reaction is. Some fans are excited about Flores. They see his defensive mind, his experience, and his familiarity with the organization. They think he could be the guy to bring the Steelers back to prominence. Others are skeptical. They don't like the idea of a coach who had a public feud with a quarterback. They don't like the lawsuit. They don't like the perception that he can be overly harsh. And they don't like the fact that he's not a new house hire. They want someone fresh, someone who feels like a clean slate, and that's where the split comes from. But before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to Steelers Nation Central and hit the like button on this video. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest updates on the Pittsburgh Steelers. And don't forget to share your thoughts on the news in the comments below. Whispers around the league suggest a seismic quarterback shakeup could be forming, and it has the feel of the kind of move that redraws power maps overnight. The rumor making the rounds claims the Pittsburgh Steelers have received a quiet but crucial signal from Kirk Cousins' camp. Openness to a move. That alone has set off a chain reaction of speculation, with insiders portraying Pittsburgh as unusually aggressive, convinced that their roster is a quarterback away from a different tier of contention. According to the chatter, negotiations with Minnesota have gone far beyond casual check-ins. The Vikings, long defined by Cousins' steadiness and leadership, are said to be listening on a package that would qualify as heavy even by quarterback standards. Multiple premium assets, possibly spanning picks and young starters, are rumored to be on the table. The Steelers' front office reportedly views the cost as painful but necessary, believing Cousins' experience and command could stabilize an offense that has lacked a clear long-term identity under center. Yet it's not the size of the trade that has rival executives uneasy. The unsettling detail lies in the structure being discussed behind the scenes. Sources hint at financial and contractual gymnastics that could push risk into future seasons, creating a scenario where Pittsburgh ties its flexibility to Cousins' durability and immediate performance in a league where one misstep can echo for years. That gamble is what has people talking in hushed tones. For Minnesota, The rumor paints a franchise at a crossroads, weighing the comfort of a proven quarterback against the temptation of a reset stocked with assets. For Pittsburgh, it suggests urgency bordering on obsession. Nothing is official, and nothing may ever be. But the mere possibility of Cousins in black and gold has already sent shockwaves through NFL circles, leaving one question hanging in the air. Is this bold vision, or the kind of risk that comes back to haunt you? That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to keep receiving exclusive news about the Pittsburgh Steelers, make sure to subscribe to Steelers Nation Central and give this video a like. We always look forward to hearing your comments and opinions. See you in the next video.